Okay, welcome back to Hunting for Hope. I have here today Brother Paul Miller. Thank you, Brother Paul, for joining me on our second podcast. I'm really
It's,
excited to
it's
be here.
my pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Brother Paul. In our last episode, we left off with you being stranded at the airport, trying to get to Pittsburgh as soon as possible to see your buddy Lucas. Do you want to dive into
Yeah, I'll
that?
pick it up. I'll pick it up there. So obviously, having spent the entire day at the airport from 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, waiting, on pins and needles to see if I was going to be able to go, and worried about Lucas. And as I said in the last podcast, that God said, "Don't worry, it's going to be okay." And so I left the airport that night, disappointed that I wasn't able to get there, but not really worried. And and so it goes back to you now, Jess, to tell us what actually happened because I wasn't there.
Well, Lucas was at this point in really dire shape. He didn't have very much time to live, and I was trying to do everything that I could. We had started this Save Lucas campaign, and like I had said previously, it went viral, and people all over the world were praying for Lucas. Um, but Lucas wasn't getting any organ donation offers. So I had taken Lucas to Cincinnati Hospital to try to get him listed in another region to open up the opportunity for him to possibly to receive a donor in another region. And when I was there, my husband, who is a pilot, he happened to be in a pilot training class on the other side of the country. Um, and we had previously said that Olivia's mom had messaged me. Now Olivia is our hero. She ended up being our donor. She was a beautiful 3-year-old girl, and she had messaged me at one point when we were in the hospital a few days prior to this, being in Cincinnati. She had messaged me what was Lucas's blood type and body weight, and I quickly gave her the answer, not knowing how she was going to use that question or my answers. So when I'm in Cincinnati and we're getting Lucas listed in another region, and my husband called and he said, "Did you hear anything about did you hear anything more from the team about any potential offers for Lucas?" And I said, "No, I haven't heard." And he said, "Well, I'm about to turn my phone off for the entire day. Will can I can I say goodbye to Lucas?" And he talked to Lucas, and that shortly uh, thereafter, I said, "Wait, Rick, what happens if we get an off blood type liver donation? What are we going to say?" And he said, "Oh, we should say no. We shouldn't accept an off blood type liver because there's so many risks." So he hung up, and 2 seconds later, I thought my phone started ringing again, and I thought that it was my husband calling back because he forgot to say something. And here it was Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh saying that Lucas had received an organ donation offer, and it ended up being Olivia, which was an off blood type liver. So I went through the most agonizing moments and hours of my life trying to decide what to do, whether or not to accept this so generous offer. I didn't know if Lucas would ever get another offer after this, and it was completely agonizing. I mean, at one point, Brother Paul, I remember just sitting in a room and doctors and nurses were coming in to talk to me for this transplant evaluation, and I couldn't hear anything that they were saying. They had to keep asking me over and over. I just drifted off into this other state. At one point I was begging God. I beg God, please God, just take Lucas and I both at this time. I didn't want to make the wrong decision. And
Right. Especially in light of what your husband said,
yeah,
which
yeah,
was let's not take an off blood type liver. Right.
yeah, as I tried calling him back because as soon as I hung up from him, I had second thoughts. Well, what if he never gets another offer? He's in really bad shape. how am I going to say
Right.
no? So I struggled immensely with that. And it was so agonizing at one point. I just wanted to die with Lucas. And I was about to crawl on the floor and just lay there when this powerful wind in a windowless room swept across my entire body. And it took my breath away. And at the same time, it just replaced all of my agony and just stress about making this decision of whether or not to accept this off blood type liver just disappeared in an instant. It was gone and it was replaced with joy. In an instant, it was complete swap of emotions. And I turned to my Rick's aunt and I said, "Oh my gosh, did you just feel that?" And she looked at me and she was crying. She said, "Yes, I felt it, and I think you should say yes." It was the most one of the most
Wow.
amazing experiences in a moment of near despair, because I was so afraid that if I made the wrong decision and I sent him for this, that I would be the one responsible at the end for if if he passed away. It was a heavy decision, but in that instant, Brother Paul, the pain was completely replaced by joy.
Right. It's like I always say, God, as I've said before, God's seldom early but never late.
So, Olivia Swedberg was our generous donor. She was a 3 year old, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful girl. I mean, an angel to the core. She just radiated this beautiful peace, and she saved Lucas.
So she passed away. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so what happened to Olivia? What happened to her?
yeah, she had passed away from an incurable brain stem tumor, and
I say,
um, yeah, yeah, it's one of those moments. It's even really hard to think when, unfortunately, for Lucas to survive, that he had to have a deceased donor, and you never want
right?
anybody to pass away in order
Of
to
course.
save yours. So that was really hard to deal with as well. To mixed emotions, being joyed that Lucas, gets another chance, but having to deal with the fact that somebody else out there was suffering tremendously was a hard weight to carry.
But from Olivia's mother's perspective and father's perspective, it helped to add meaning to her life, right? That she was able to love, that they were able to love Lucas in this way, and to be able to give him a gift of life, because her daughter, their daughter was passed away anyway. So
Yeah.
it's that opportunity that comes up for people who are potential donors, organ donors. It makes the whole story so poignant. The idea that you've lost a child, but then you have that child has the ability to help another child live. It's just overwhelming emotionally, right?
Yeah, overwhelming. It was just such an act of love and courage and all those emotions. It was just really beautiful, and um, just to think that somebody who's suffering so much in such could be in a complete state of despair potentially, and that they are able to see that and be a light for somebody else. To me, it takes my breath
Yeah,
away that somebody in that moment can
yeah.
show so much love, and we know that it's God is there with them during that time.
So from the time you found out that this was a potential donation, what was the time frame, and how long did it take before you actually had to get Lucas to the hospital?
Yeah, so I after that wave of peace, literally as if a strong wind gust has blew right through me. After that, I called the team and I said I'm accepting this wonderful offer that we have, and they said, Well, great. We still have some more testing to do, and but we'll get back to you. So we continued on with our normal day, and we went back to Rick's aunt's house. And it wasn't until the next morning that we finally got the call to come home to Pittsburgh because was going to have his transplant. So we were overjoyed, like excited. Okay, well, we just let's start to head home, Lucas. We don't want to waste time. And here's my husband again. He had the night before he had finished his training, and I when he was running through the airport, I said, Rick, I have to tell you something before you get on a flight. I accepted an offer. At this stage in our life, everything was so crazy. Rick and I we didn't hardly ever have a chance to talk. So he took the news really well, and he said, that's great. I'm coming to Cincinnati. And that night he tried to get to us, but he ended up not being able to get on any flight, so he was stuck in O'Hare overnight. So now it's the morning, and
Uh,
he calls me. He says, I'm about to get on a plane to Cincinnati to see you. Have you heard anything from the team?" And at this point, when I talked to him, I said, "No, I haven't heard anything." And then, wouldn't you know, it happened again. He hung up to go shut off his phone for the rest, and he was going to come to Cincinnati to meet us. And the hospital called and said, "Great news! Come home to Pittsburgh." And I was like, "All right, we are on our way home. We'll be there in 5 or 6 hours because we had to drive." And I was like, "Oh my God, my husband! He's coming to Cincinnati, and we're going to Pittsburgh. He's going to miss the transplant." So I tried to call him back, and his phone was ringing and ringing and ringing, and he always shut his phone off as soon as he got on the airplane. But for this day, for whatever reason, he had his phone on, and I was like, "Rick, we got the transplant. Get off that airplane. We're not going to be in Cincinnati." So thankfully, he was able to run off the airplane right before they shut the door, and he
oh
flew
wow!
back to Pittsburgh. Yeah, he almost, he made it just in time, right before they took Lucas down. So
So we had a chance to visit with Lucas before the operation.
yeah, Rick was able to. We all gathered in on the seventh floor. Cooper came, and he was just he was around 4 years old at the time, and so those two
Mhm.
were playing with saline, squirting each other as if they were squirt guns. And I remember looking outside the window, and seeing, it was almost like a movie, Brother Paul. There were just reporters and vehicles just stacked up all outside the front entrance, just everyone standing outside covering the story about how Lucas is going to receive this miraculous transplant, that an offer that he received on Facebook, and that at this point nobody knew yet it was Olivia. But
Right. So tell us about the operation itself. How long did it last, and what did you
yeah.
guys do while it was going on?
Yeah, so the operation itself was very long. They took him around 7, and they didn't finish until about 7 a.m. So overnight, Rick and I just sat in the cold waiting room. We were the only ones there. It was cold and dark, and Rick's like, "Well, my pilot husband, who can sleep anywhere, he's like, I think I'm just gonna go to sleep." And he just laid down on that gross hospital carpet, face first, with no blanket or pillow, and
Oh,
he just
okay.
went to sleep. Yeah. Um, I, of course, ended up, I didn't sleep. I'm sure most mothers wouldn't. And I just stayed up all night answering messages, and people were just sending me thousands of messages all night.
When were you able to see Lucas?
Sometime the next morning around 8 or 9 a.m. Actually, I finally fell asleep probably around 6 a.m. and I woke up to hear the TVs were all turned on in the operating room. I woke up to hear my son's name on all the different stations, which was really neat. The press was covering the story the whole time, and then the surgeons came out and said that he was doing great. So
That's wonderful. So you got a chance to to visit with him, and he wanted to eat, right? That's all he wanted to do.
Yeah, it took a couple days. Actually, brother Paul, this is where you come back into the story. Um,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
was being on the ventilator for a few days, and because there was a lot of complications potentially with an off blood type liver, so the team was trying to do their best to prevent some of those complications. And so Lucas on the ventilator a few days. They're doing all these preventative treatments, and so Lucas finally gets off the ventilator, and he's actually in pretty rough shape. I remember holding him, and he just felt like a limp noodle, and he was all out of sorts and drooling. And we've been through a lot of surgeries up until this point, but never did I see him where I was actually like pretty worried about him. And then Brother Paul said, I'm coming to Pittsburgh. You always come right when we need you the most." And so
Mm,
Brother Paul, and there's this picture that's floating around on the internet. I've shared it a number of times, but we're in the ICU, and Brother Paul is bending down, actually blessing Lucas's abdomen. So Brother Paul is kneeling on the floor, and I'm holding Lucas, and he's blessing Lucas's abdomen. And so that picture is still floating around out there. I think it's one of the coolest pictures. Actually, Mike Clark had featured it in his story for our campaign recently, Brother Paul.
hmm.
Um,
It
so
was
yeah,
so amazing to see him like that, come through that operation.
yeah,
It was so shocking, right?
yeah. I mean, it was incredibly shocking, and I remember after your blessing, you gave him a ton of blessings. And the next day, you were coming to see him again. And remember, he was like sitting up. He was out of the ICU. He was on the floor, and he was eating
Yeah.
eggs. just,
Eating,
just,
I've never seen such with such gusto. He was eating
yeah.
a plate full of scrambled eggs, and he kept wanting more and more and more.
It
It
was
was
it
pretty
was
funny.
amazing. It was like God was injecting this joy and laughter in a situation that you wouldn't really suspect based on what you saw the day before. I was so shocked when I
Yeah,
saw it. It took my breath away. It was really great to see. That picture too is also out on our Facebook page.
I remember so much seeing the incision on his tummy. It was unbelievable how big it was, and I'm thinking to myself, this kid is eating so much, and look at this. It was just such a weird look. It was, but he looked so happy and so hungry. It was
Yeah.
such a wonderful thing, especially for me because I missed the whole operation part of it. But of course, I was hanging on, waiting for the good news to happen.
You got there, Brother Paul, just when we needed you.
I know, thank God. So what? So it wasn't all rosy though. After
No.
that, right? Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that
Yeah.
part of it.
So everything that the doctors were trying to prevent with an off blood type liver basically happened to Lucas. It was a struggle, and it was partially a struggle too because when he was transplanted, he was already so incredibly sick that he was so sick they almost couldn't start the transplant because they couldn't gain access to all of his very weak veins because his blood flow was so poor. Um, so after the transplant, it's a miraculous transplant, but he's still very sick. So recovery is incredibly hard. He's incredibly malnourished, and he has this rare rejection on top of it, and he loses about 25% of his liver because the blood flow actually stopped. His hepatic artery, one of the main supplies to the liver, had clotted off, and so so it was detrimental to a portion of the liver. Um, so that was a little bit unnerving. I mean, I after knowing and seeing how God had interacted in our lives, I wasn't worried. I know that God had a plan, but I mean, it was an emergency kind of operation, a view at Lucas's liver. It was late at night. all surgeons were there. All four of the transplant surgeons were there looking and analyzing this situation when they had Lucas back in the OR. And we're Rick and I are sitting in the operating or in the waiting room, and we know that this could lead to a last second emergency retransplant. So we're just sitting in the waiting room waiting, and I don't think either of us were too incredibly worried. We were just watching TV, like, okay, well, I mean, God got us this far, and he's it's not going to fail us right now at this moment. So it it ended up they were able to stabilize Lucas, and in the meantime, his liver was able to take started to create collateral blood flows. So the liver was saved from that rejection.
And how old was Lucas at that time?
He was 2.
Yeah.
He was 2 years old, so one of the toughest kids I know, to be honest.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So tell us what happened after. How long was in the hospital for, and what happened after that?
Yeah, so we were in the hospital for about a month. Again, we kept having all of these bumps along the way, but they were able to stabilize his liver and his rejection. And Lucas and I, we spent a lot of time, as much as we could, when he was stable enough. We would go outside and we would just walk. We try to find a quiet place outside, and we would walk and walk and walk. Kind of just I would try to find animals, and just being outside really encouraged him to want to get better. So we'd walk probably like 6 to 8 miles a day, and then we would go back in for his medicines and his treatments. Then we would go back out, and um, and through this time, he started to get stronger. When he went in for the transplant, he couldn't walk. He was hardly talking. And during this time, we started to see Lucas for the first time in 2 years actually present like a personality, and he was able to start to say words and what he wanted, and he was starting to get strong enough to actually stand up and take steps. And it was so beautiful to see, because he was so far behind previously.
It's amazing, right? What the transformation was amazing.
It was incredible. It was so incredible. And then it just only continued by the time when we got home. It just continued. He just kept getting stronger and stronger. He he had to overcome still yet a lot of challenges. He eventually had lost his portal vein of his liver too, because he was so malnourished for so long.
No, it's important to tell people that when you say malnourished, it didn't mean because it didn't mean because you weren't feeding him. It was because he
Yeah.
wasn't absorbing the food.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he wasn't.
because I think people don't understand the nature of what happens, right?
When the liver fails. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, he was definitely. Trust me, we fed him and fed him and fed him. I've never actually seen a 2 year old eat so much. That's all he loved to do. When I say eat a lot, you're going to be shocked when I tell you, and I'm about to tell you.
Yeah.
So, 8 eggs, 2 to 3 waffles, a glass of orange juice. Sometimes he would have like a piece of sausage or a banana or an orange. I mean, that's a lot for me right now, but he would eat that in one sitting, up until his
Yep.
transplant, and or when he was healthy, before he started to decline so rapidly. But yeah, it was crazy, and he didn't gain any muscle mass. You can't, when the liver is failing, you cannot overcome that
Yeah.
with it's really hard to gain muscle mass.
So his brother Cooper must have been happy to have him home, huh?
Oh, he
After
couldn't.
this, because they had spent so much time apart because of all this, right?
Yeah, those two were like two peas in a pod. I have some pictures still on the Facebook page of those two when they finally got to meet again, and they're holding hands and they're hugging and kissing each other. I mean, talk about just heartwarming. They're still like
Yeah.
that too. Now they'll fight, but then 2 seconds later, hey, you want to go do this? Yeah, yeah, let's go do this. So they're only 18 months apart.
So sometimes you think that these kind of traumas are focused only on the child that's sick, but also it affects the whole family, especially other siblings, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
it is really sad.
it
Like
was
I
traumatic. Had to be traumatic for Cooper as well,
Oh
right?
yeah, I mean this is what Cooper used to think. He thought that Lucas lived in the hospital. Lucas's room is in the hospital, and Daddy's room is in the hotel, and it's just me and Mommy. And that was just so sad because, well, my husband was always working, um, because he was our only income at the time, and Lucas was just always in and out of the hospital. So poor Cooper, he was always shuffled around from grandparents. He would start to get anxiety when I would drop Lucas off, or when I drop him off at his grandparents, and he knew I was going to take Lucas to a doctor's appointment because there had been so many times before where I would drop him off and he thought I was coming back, and then something happened and I didn't come back for like 6 7 days, and that was incredibly traumatizing for Cooper. It took many years for him to get over that, and I still even see instances now where he's still affected by his childhood
Yeah,
traumas. Yeah,
it'd have to be because of the nature of what was going on. It was life, literally life and death all the time,
all the
right?
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was literally always a
So,
life and death battle.
so, so Lucas has been transplanted. He's overcome all the side effects of a non-blood type transplant. And so, what was the next sort of benchmark thing that happened to him in his life?
Yeah, so everybody was hoping that he would start to get bigger and stronger. And he was overcoming, he was talking, he was walking, we were getting him to walk up the steps, he was getting stronger, but he still wasn't gaining that expected muscle mass, and his abdomen, even though he had a transplant, was still pretty big. So he still, while he looked better than he did before, he still had this abnormal look about him, and nobody really could understand why. Everybody, all the doctors thought, oh, he was essentially very malnourished because he was so sick, and it's just going to take some time, and his body will start to grow, and his belly won't look so big. But that actually wasn't the case. He he actually had an issue with his intestines, and the way that they found out, which is not funny, but it is really funny, and sometimes we still we still laugh about it with Lucas to this day. He swallowed a screw, and this one Easter, I don't know how he did it, but the screw that attaches to the screen door, somehow he got that screw off the hinge, a big screw. I don't It's no wonder he didn't choke to death. um, and he had swallowed it, and how we found out was the team is starting to, and look into why he's not gaining muscle mass and his belly's so big, and he goes in for an MRI. And Rick and I have been in the waiting room now so many times that we know when something's not right. So they take Lucas back and they put him under anesthesia, and they're going to begin to do the MRI. And only a short period of time passes before the anesthesiologist comes into the waiting room, calls out for Rick and I, and asks and takes us back into a room. And at this point, no, Rick is like, do, everything's fine. And I'm like, oh my gosh, something's not, something's not right. Well,
Right.
here they found out that he had swallowed the screw, and everybody was laughing because we were like, what? Oh my gosh. What just happened? Why does he have a screw in his intestines? So it was one of those like, oh my gosh, because when they tried to turn on the MRI scanner, they ask you thousands of questions before you go in. Do you have any metal in your body? Do you have any? And
Right, right.
I'm like, no, no, he doesn't have any metal in his body. No, he doesn't have this or that. They're like, but he has a screw in his intestines.
Yikes.
So, anyways, that ended up leading to them figuring out that he needed his intestines fixed, because the screw, actually, when they were monitoring, it should have progressed through his intestines normally, but it kept bouncing back around in his intestines, and they realized that there was something not right there. So it was actually like the miracle of the screw that helped him
Exactly.
solve that
So I
one
think
issue.
that's a good place to sort of end up, is with
the,
the miracle screw in
the
Lucas's
miracle screw.
intestines, trying to figure out what's going to happen next.
Yeah,
So
yeah. We're interesting, right, Brother Paul? Would you?
his story goes on and on. Yeah, for sure.
Have you ever seen
So
anything
so
like it?
well, I've seen some pretty unbelievable things. So,
Yeah, just
but
not the
God,
miracle of the screw.
yeah, God continues to show up at just at the right time, right? Yeah,
Always at the right time.
yeah. So anyway, so it's been a pleasure being with you this podcast, and
Thank you, Brother Paul.
I look forward to the next one, because our story together isn't over.
Nope, nope. Brother Paul's going to have to come back in and fix the miracle of the screw.
So until
Okay.
next time, we'll see you. God bless.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Paul.